Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I apologize for the previous session. It was cut short. I'm back on the same page with you, and I hope you have had the time to look at the answers and see what you did right, what you did wrong, and why that happened. So now, after we have practiced using the simple past, and seeing how it's different from the present perfect, we move on to the second narrative tense, which is the past continuous. Notice that the past continuous is formed using was or were plus the present participle. Was is used with I, he, she, it, and were is used with, wait a minute, let me use the, okay. And the present, were is used with you, they, and we. Of course, we know the difference between was and were. Now, the present participle is another name for the ing form. It is the proper name, actually, of the present, of the ing. So, how do we form the questions? We form the questions by inverting the subject and was or were. So what do we mean by inverting the subject? We've studied questions before, but again, I will repeat. When we have were plus the ing form in a sentence, and we want to change that sentence into a question, we just use the were or the was before the subject. That's inversion. We use the helping verb before the subject. So how do we use the negatives? Since we already have a helping verb, so this helping verb will carry the not. So when we want to make the negatives, we use was or were plus the not. And of course, after that, we have the main verb. Let's look at the three examples that we have in front of us. The statement is you were studying when she called. You were studying. Were studying is the past continuous. It's made up of were plus the ing. Question, were you studying when she called? Again, see the inversion. The were is moved before, we move the were to a position before the subject. This is called inversion. And finally, the negative, you were not studying when she called. So this is how we form the verb. Let's move on and see how we can use the present, how we can use the past continuous. Again, this is a reminder of was and were. This is a reminder of the use of the past continuous. It's about a verb that has been or that had continued for some time in the past. So the first use is interrupted action in the past. Use the past continuous to indicate that a longer action in the past was interrupted. The interruption is usually a shorter action in the simple past. Remember, this can be a real interruption or just an interruption in time. Okay, let's look at the examples. I was watching TV. This is the action that was taking time in the past. Was watching TV. Then what happened to interrupt this watching? When she called. She called. So the calling here interrupted the watching here. This is in the past continuous because it took time. And she called is in the simple past because this is the point where the interruption occurred in the past. When the phone rang, she was writing a letter. Was writing is the verb that took time, and the phone ringing is the thing that interrupted the writing. What were you doing when the fire started? Again, notice past continuous with a simple past as interruption. I apologize. I was listening to my iPod, so I didn't hear the fire alarm. Again, the listening and didn't hear. You were not listening to me when I told you to turn the oven off. Were not listening is the continuous. When I told you is the simple past interrupting action. While John was sleeping, someone stole his car. So the stealing happened at a certain point while John was sleeping. So this is the continuous verb and this is the simple past. Sammy was waiting for us when we got off the plane. Got off is the simple past, was waiting is the past continuous. While I was writing the email, the computer suddenly went off. And finally, what were you doing when you broke your leg? And the answer is, I was snowboarding. So what is another use for the past continuous? The second use is specific time as an interruption. So in all of the examples in the first use, there were two things happening. One taking time, one suddenly happening. One taking time and one suddenly happening. So watching TV took time and then she called all of a sudden. Writing the letter was happening, took time, and then the phone rang. So there were two actions, one interrupting the other. In the second use, there is no action that interrupts, but a specific time, a mention of time. So let's read. In use 1, described above, the past continuous is interrupted by a shorter action in the simple past. However, you can also use a specific time as an interruption. Yani we consider the mention of a specific time, a specific hour, a specific day as an interruption, as a point of interruption. Look at this. Last night at 6 p.m., I was eating dinner. So I was eating dinner takes time. This is a past continuous verb because it has taken time. The eating took time. You don't eat in half a second. You take time while you're eating, at least 5, 10, 15 minutes. So it says here, last night at 6 p.m., 6 p.m., the mention of this time came as instead of the action verb that interrupts. So 6 p.m. So I probably started before 6 and I continued till after 6. But 6 is a time that is considered an interruption point for the eating. At midnight, we were still driving through the desert. We're driving, and the point in time is midnight. Yesterday at this time, I was sitting at my desk. Again, was sitting is the verb that took time, and yesterday at this time is the specific interruption or the specific time of interruption. Okay. Notice this important note. In the simple past, a specific time is used to show when an action happened. The action is seen as having no duration. So it's as if you're, looking at the action with a zoom out lens. So you only see it as a point in time, one point in time. You don't think of its duration. You don't think of how much time it took to happen. So you don't see the duration because you don't want to focus on the duration. However, when using the past continuous, this implies duration. Duration means time, the time it took for the verb to happen. So the specific time mentioned with the past continuous is a point in time within that duration, during that time period. An example, last night at 6 p.m., I ate dinner. That means, of course, I can't eat dinner in 1 second. It's not like 6 p.m. I ate dinner. But again, I might have started eating dinner, or it's because I don't really care how much time it took me. I'm just mentioning the eating of dinner in passing as a point in time. But in the second sentence, when I say, last night at 6 p.m. I was eating dinner, then probably what comes next is an explanation of what happened while I was eating. So here, when I say was eating dinner, I'm trying to concentrate on the eating as an action that took time. When I say I ate dinner, I don't want to concentrate on time. I don't want to talk about it as a time period or a duration. Use number 3, parallel actions. When you use the past continuous with two actions in the same sentence, it expresses the idea that both actions were happening at the same time. The actions are parallel, so they go side by side. They are continuing over time together. Let's look at the examples. I was studying while he was making dinner. Was studying took time, and was making dinner also took time. And both of these happened together simultaneously in parallel. So, while Ellen was reading, Tim was watching television. Again, was reading and was watching. Were you listening while he was talking? I wasn't paying attention while I was writing. I wasn't paying attention while I was writing. Notice the parallel structure. What were you doing while you were waiting? Thomas wasn't working, and I wasn't working either. And finally, they were eating dinner, discussing their plans, and having a good time. Notice here that we have 3 verbs that are parallel and coming or happening at the same time. This is written in the form of a list or a series. I hope this use is clear, and now we move on to the following. Use number 4, atmosphere. In English, we often use a series of parallel actions to describe the atmosphere at a particular time in the past, especially when we're telling stories. And this takes us back to the uses of the narrative tenses in the book, because I told you the book concentrates on past tenses as used in writing. So now, this is another use for the past continuous, where we give, as I said before, it draws a background picture of the situation, as if it's providing me with the setting, the atmosphere, and what was happening around the main character in the story. Let's read the example. When I walked into the office, several people were busily typing, some were talking on the phones, the boss was yelling directions, and customers were waiting to be helped. All of this was happening. So the typing, the talking, the yelling, the waiting, all of this is background action. One customer was yelling at the secretary and waving his hands. Others were complaining to each other about the bad service. Again, all of these verbs are in the past continuous to paint a picture of the atmosphere of the place and how it was when this person, this character, the I, walked in. While versus when. When do we use while and when do we use when? Notice that while and when are very similar to since. They are both, or they can be both, used as subordinating conjunctions that introduce dependent sentences. While, when, and since introduce clauses or dependent clauses that convey time. Let's read. Clauses are groups of words which have meaning, but they are often not complete sentences. You remember when we talked about independent and dependent clauses. Some clauses begin with the word when, such as when she called, when it bit me, when I left, when you came. All of these clauses are dependent clauses that show time. Other clauses begin with while, such as while she was sleeping, while he was surfing, and maybe while you are listening now, while we were in class together. All of these clauses, what do they give us? They give us an indication of when the verb happened in the main clause. When you talk about things in the past, when is most often followed by the verb tense or the simple tense, the simple past tense, whereas while is usually followed by the past continuous. While expresses the idea of during that time, and when usually indicates that two things happened at the same time. We will talk more about when in the next lesson when we discuss time expressions. So I'm going to repeat. While expresses the idea of during that time, and we have to study the examples below. They have similar meanings, but they emphasize different parts of the sentence. Let's see. I was studying when she called. I was studying when she called. The studying took time and something interrupted my studying. It's her call. So when she called, and called is in the simple past, and it is the interrupting verb of the main verb was studying. Notice the second sentence. While I was studying, she called. While I was studying, that is in the process or during that time when I was studying, she called. Here, after a while, we use the past continuous. Remember, state verbs are not used in the continuous tense. And we said this is true for all tenses, present, past, and future. So it is important to remember that state verbs cannot be used in any continuous tense. And as such, we can't use them in the past continuous. Instead of using the past continuous with these verbs, we must use the simple past. For example, Jane was being at my house when you arrived. Jane was being is incorrect. This is a wrong sentence. How can we express the same idea without using the past continuous? Notice the second sentence. It says, Jane was at my house when you arrived. And this is a correct sentence. Notice that because was, or verb to be, is a stative verb and cannot be used in the ing form, then I can use the simple past instead. So we're going to have another quiz. This is quiz time again. I want you to use the simple past or the past continuous to fill in the blanks in the following sentences. I want you to stop the video, copy the sentences in your notebook, and try to answer the questions. After you write the sentences, give yourselves 5 minutes to do that or to find the answer. Remember again, the simple past is made up of verb plus ed or irregular forms like talked, walked is with ed, and came and sang are irregular forms. And the past continuous is made up of was or were, depending on the subject, plus the present participle or the ing form. Let's go to the quiz. This is our second quiz. Take your time, read the sentences, try to find signal words, try to understand the situation, and try to see what the speaker wants to express. It is not always about signal words. The context means a lot. You have to understand the context of each sentence. So now I'm going to leave you, and you can come back later and tell me what you think, what you found. Hello, are you back? Are you done? Okay, let's get back to the quiz and answer the questions together. So, question number 1. What you do when the accident occurred? Here, when the accident occurred is in the simple past. So, something was happening or taking time when the accident occurred. So here I have to use sorry, I apologize. Okay, again. So now I want to write the answer. What were you doing? What were you doing when the accident occurred? So this is the answer to this question. How about the second sentence? It says, I tried to change a light bulb that had burnt out. Usually when we use the verb try, this takes time. So this is a verb that needs duration. Again, the answer is, I was trying to change a light bulb that had burnt out. Moving on. Number 2. After I find the wallet full of money, I go immediately to the police and turn it in. None of these verbs shows duration. On the contrary, all of them show that they are actions in the past that happened at a specific time. So, what do? I think the best thing to do here is to use the simple past. Again, these are 3 simple past forms that come in a series. So after I found the wallet, I went immediately. Sorry, I can add the adverb here. I immediately went to the police and turned it in. Turned it in means gave it to them. Okay, let's move to sentence 3. The doctor say that Tom be too sick to go to work and that he need to stay at home for a couple of days. So, what do we say? The doctor said that Tom was too sick to go to work and that he needed to stay at home. Apologize. Dealing with technology is not an easy thing. Okay, Sebastian arrived at Susan's house a little before 9 p.m., but she be not there. So, arrive happened at a certain point in the past. Sebastian arrived at Susan's house, but she, here the verb should be in the continuous, but because verb to be is a stative verb, we cannot use it in the continuous. And so we have to use it in the present past continuous, sorry, simple past. But she wasn't there. She, what was she doing at the time? She was at the library studying at the library. Okay, Sandy is in the living room watching television. At this time yesterday, so I have a specific mention of time here. This is considered an interruption, or it's like a simple past verb, an interruption. She was watching She was also, sorry, there's an also here. Notice that the adverbs come in between the helping verb and the main verb. So she was also watching television. That's all she ever does. I hope you're not wasting your time, ladies and gentlemen, all the time sitting and just watching TV. I hope that you're doing a bit of reading, you know, using this time wisely. Inshallah. Okay, so I call you last night after dinner, but you be not there. I called you last night after dinner, but you were not or weren't, but you weren't there. I work at the fitness, I work out at the fitness center. So what was happening all of that time in the evening when I called you? And the answer is I was working out at the fitness center. Finally, sentence number 7. When I walk into the busy office, here again, this is a sentence that shows atmosphere. When I walked into the busy office, what was the secretary doing? The secretary was talking. The secretary was talking on the phone with a customer. Several clerks, what were they doing? The clerks, they were busily working at their desks. And 2 managers, what were the managers doing? They were quietly discussing methods to improve customer service. I think this was a good drill. This was a good exercise for you to check your understanding. I hope you have a great time after this lesson. Take a break, and I'll see you in part 3, where we talk more about narrative tenses and we continue with the past perfect, inshallah. Take care and be safe.